Now we're gonna talk about fake news in history. So, false news are harmful to our community. It makes us less informed, and it erodes the truth. So, is fake news a new phenomenon? No, at all. It turned out that actually it is a very old concept from history. Now I'm gonna talk about some historical moments so that you know more about it. The first historical moment that we're gonna talk about is the king's health is falling, as you can see in the picture. And back in the mid 70s, during the height of Jacobite rebellion in Great Britain, seditious printers printed fake news, even going so far to the report that King George II was ill in an attempt to destabilize the establishment. Such fake news was picked up by more reputable printers and republished, making it difficult to tell fact from fiction. Responding to complaints about the practice, Attorney General Dudley Rightly wrote a letter. As the publication of such false news of His Majesty has a tendency to disquiet the minds of his subject, hurt public credit, and diminish the regard and duty which they owe him, I think he doing it with such views is an offense punishable at common law and for which an indictment or information can lie. And the frequency of such publication is evidence of such which design. But as every false report of this kind, which may arise from the mistakes, only cannot be changed as a crime. So it's very difficult to say how often it must be repeated in the paper to make it criminal. I don't know any method to prevent this practice, but by prosecuting the offenders when they are guilty. The English press in the 18th century. As long ago as this was, printing fake news about monarchy was not yet in the 70s either. In 1693, a printer by name William Anderton was tried at Old Bailey for high treason when he published two tracts designed to incite the population to rebellion against the king and that called for the restoration of the late King James. On Tuesday in the afternoon, William Anderton, printer, was brought to the bar and an indictment half tension was read against him. For that he did compose, print and publish two malicious, scandalous and traditional libels, the first entitled Remarks upon the present Confederacy and late revolution in England. The second entitled A French Conquest, neither described nor predictable. The second is Report of Peace with France, Sandstock soaring in London. So in May 1803, as Britain was preparing to end the Treaty of Amiens and declare war to France, a letter was hand-delivered to Sir Charles Price, the Lord Mayor of London, at the Mason House, allegedly written by Lord Hawkesbury and sealed with his personal seal. The letter claimed that the dispute with France was amicably settled. The mayor at once took the letter to the stock exchange to share this joyful news. So what happened during the time? It happened that the stocks immediately rose 5%. Meanwhile, suspicions about the validity of letter were raised. When it was determined that the letter was indeed not true, the Treasury sent the following press release to the editors of London evening papers. I have to acquaint you that the message which was supposed to have been sent this morning from Lord Hawkesbury to the Lord Mayor, stating that the negotiations with France had terminated amicably, was a fabrication and totally destitute of truth. I am, sir, your most obedient, humble servant, John Sargent. By then, of course, it was too late. Many stocks had changed hands at inflated rates, and the Committee of Stock Exchange called for reports from brokers to determine who might have gained from the frauded letter. All attempts to identify the perpetrator of the hoax failed. Life on the moon, as from the picture which you see, on 21st of August 1835, the New York Sun published series of articles about discovery of life, of new form of life on the moon. This was falsely attributed to a well-known astronomer of the time named Sir John Herschel. And of course, this was not true. You can actually see the picture which was created as part of what could have been on the moon. The article reported that Herschel had made these discoveries using new hydro-oxygen magnifiers, and went on to describe in believable scientific detail how the discovery was made. Bizarre life forms, inhabitants on the moons were described, painting a fantastical picture of animals. He classified 9 species of mammalia and 5 of ovipara. Among the former is small kid of reindeer, the elk, the mouse, the horned deer, the beaver. The last resembles the beaver on the earth in every other respect than its destitution of tail and its habit of walking upon 2 feet. It carries its young in its arms like human being, and moves with an easy motion. Great astronomical discovery lately made was on the sun. Tuesday, August 27, 1835. After accomplishing their goals of adding many new subscribers to their newspaper that August, the paper quietly announced in September that the story has been nothing more than a hoax. Fake report of outrage on French railway. Madame Marquette, the wife of an Algerian apothecary, claimed in December 1890 that she had been set upon and robbed when riding in the ladies' compartment on a French train. The train had departed from Monte Carlo, and on reaching Toulon, she told authorities that at some point in the journey, while she was sleeping, a thief had made off with 7,000 francs. So as you can see in the picture, there was some skepticism about her claim when she was unable to prove any detail about her assailant. But another report of a similar occurrence some days later led credence to her story. An Italian man attacked a passenger traveling between Lyons and Grenoble with a knife and threatened to kill him unless he handed over his money. The attacker then jumped from the train but was captured when the victim pulled the emergency cord and stopped the train. It was thought that the same assailant had robbed Madame Marquette after hypnotizing her and drugging her with chloroform. The authorities still had suspicions, however, and further investigation finally turned up the truth. Madame Marquette had gone to Monte Carlo to collect a debt, but once there she was lured by the roulette tables and lost all her money. Fearing her husband's anger, Madame Marquette made up a tale about being robbed. Finally, under pressure from police, she confessed she had fabricated the story. She was persecuted on a charge of disseminating false news. The next one is Jack the Ripper. And the illustrated police news. In 1888, a series of brutal slayings in Whitechapel, district of East London, were widely reported. Accounts of the 11 murders, typically involving prostitutes, were described in graphic detail in the newspapers of the time. Many tried to profit from high-profile cases by spreading fake news. Two young men, full of drink, were arrested and charged with spreading fake news. The pair were in Reightslake and Kensington with their bundles of newspaper and were heard to shout arrest of Jack Ripper tonight. At the top of their voices, William MacDonald and George Wright, news vendors, were taken before the court but later discharged. James Kendrick, another news vendor, was also charged with crying out false news about Jack the Ripper. After slow Sunday sales, he'd been calling that there was horrible discovery of a missing woman at Charing Cross. Later, he cried out that 4 women were discovered slashed at Charing Cross. One customer who bought one of his papers found no such article in sight and took the matter to the police. The news vendor was sentenced to 14 days in gaol with hand labor. The report of my death was an exaggeration. In June 1897, reports out of New York were that Mark Twain was dying in poverty in London. That this was fake news was confirmed by Mark Twain himself. New York Journal and Advertiser, June 2, 1897. On 2nd June 1897, an article headlined Mark Twain Amused appeared in the New York Journal under the byline of Frank Marshall White. When reached for commitment, Mark Twain told the reporter that he did not know whether to be amused or annoyed. He assumed him that he was living with his wife and children in a very nice house in Chelsea, and was hardly living in poverty. Nor was he ill. It was Twain's belief that the story came about because of a cousin of him, James Ross Clemens of St. Louis, was ill in London.
2 or 3 weeks previously, although he had since recovered. The report of my death was an exaggeration. The report of my poverty is hardly to deal with. My friends might know that unless I was actually dying of poverty, I should not live in poverty when I am receiving offers to lecture by every mail. The fact is that I was under contract to write the book that I had just finished, or I should have accepted this offer. Mark Twain in New York Journal. Next one is the new fake news trap. In 1930, the Clarksburg Daily Telegram published a purposely fake news story in an effort to expose Clarksburg Daily News, who they knew were preferring their articles. The story was about the shooting of Mesh Swenkofer near Columbia Mines, and predictably it appeared the next day in Daily News. The story told how Swenkofer, a Slav living near the Columbia coal mine, was shot and was in critical conditions after an altercation with an acquaintance over a pet dog. The most unlikely name featured in the story, Sweeney Scuffle, spelled backwards, read with fake news. The Daily News, thus being caught out, was forced to acknowledge that it had been lifting articles from the Daily Telegram to several months. What's that got to do with the price of eggs? The next one. So in 1916, the price of eggs have risen to an unprecedented 80 cents a dozen in some parts of the country. The women of America decided to boycott eggs. By the end of November, there was a statewide boycott of eggs planned by the women and public officials. The St. Paul housewives in Minnesota declared a boycott on cold storage eggs. Milwaukee Club women appealed to members to stop buying eggs for 6 weeks. Miss Alice Logan began collecting signatures on a petition to Washington to ask Congress to provide relief from the high cost of America morning eggs. Then on Friday, 8 December that year, an apparent victory was in sight. Headlines of eggs dropped 10 cents and cost of living smashed appeared in Chicago newspaper, but the following day it became apparently that it was nothing but fake news, since the retail groceries in the city continued selling eggs at same price. It was allegedly that the newspaper was in cahoots with the food retailers. The price continued to fluctuate with supply and demand, and the cost of eggs continued to rise steadily in the years following 1916 boycotts. World War and fake news. In spring 1917, the World War raged across Europe. Both the Times and Daily Mail in London published accounts from anonymous source that claimed that had visited an cadaver factory called Cadaver Wingstown in Germany. This factory was said to extract glycerin from the corpus of the fallen to make soap and margarine. And of course, now long after the war, the story has been attributed and for paid writers, and it was of course a false story. And the horrific fake news story was only one of thousands reported by both sides during war. In an example from the German propaganda machine, the French minister were reported in 1914 that the Germans is Alsace-Lorraine were published news that the French parliament had voted against the war and that the president of Republic had been assassinated.